Hey, hi guys. Hey, it's Grandma. Of course, right? All right, I've got another great story for you today. This is called Wheedle on the Needle. I have never read the story before, and I'm excited to read it today because I've been seeing it on my coffee table. It's one that your mom and dad brought for me to read, and I can't wait to read it. And it's a story about, I'm assuming this is Wheedle, and this is the Space Needle. Isn't that pretty cool? Yeah, I can't wait to read this one. I have never seen the Space Needle in person. One thing, I've been to a lot of places across the country, and so has your dad, and your mom, I'm sure, too. But I've never been to Space Needles. Maybe someday we'll go there, huh? That'd be pretty cool. Wheedle on the Needle. And the Space Needle is this really cool thing that you can ride up an elevator and go up, and you can got the windows up there and see really, really far. And I believe it's in Seattle, Washington. It's pretty cool, which is all the way across the country. It is. We're in New York State. We're on one side of the country, and it's all the way on the total opposite side of the country. Pretty cool. So many nice things and neat things to see in our country. All right, I'm going to turn a little bit here so you can see better. Wheedle on the Needle. Okay. One day in 1974, my mind took creating a story about and for Seattle, using the Space Needle as a background. So this author is telling a little story about why he wrote this book. Pretty cool, huh? Let's get right to the story. Many, many years ago, before explorers sailed to the Northwest, there lived a large, happy creature called the Wheedle. This is Wheedle. Can you say Wheedle? Good. He was pleasingly plump, covered in orange fluffy fur, and had a big round red nose. He spent his days sniffing flowers and enjoying the peace and quiet that nature offered. Forever and a day, everything was peaceful, until one afternoon the Wheedle watched curiously as a large ship sailed into the bay. Laughing loudly, workers jumped from the ship and set about clearing the land and building this, that, and other things. As they worked, they whistled, and the more they worked, the more they whistled. All that whistling hurt the poor Wheedle's ears. Oh, he didn't like the whistling. The whistling continued night and day, and the Wheedle could get absolutely no sleep at all. With no sleep, he became grouchier and grouchier. Oh, let's see what's going to happen. It was, if he was ever going to get some sleep, the Wheedle knew he must put a stop to all this whistling. Can you whistle? I love to whistle. He thought. If the workers don't have their tools, they won't be able to work. And if they can't work, they won't whistle. So later that night, he sneaked into the workers' camp and took all of their tools. Sadly for the Wheedle, the next morning, the men quickly got the tools from the ship and went back to work, whistling even louder than before. Let's see what's going to happen. If anything, the Wheedle was resourceful. He decided that the next best thing to do was to scare the workers. For when workers are scared, they can't pucker. And when they can't pucker, they can't whistle. You have to pucker your lips. As we all know, puckerless whistle is no whistle at all. One by one, he began creeping up behind them and growling at the top of his voice. Roar! Sure enough, the workers were so scared that they couldn't whistle a whit. All would have been the Wheedle's salvation, save for one brave lumberjack who, to prove he wasn't scared, simply whistled. The Wheedle put his hands over his ears and ran into the forest. Well, let me tell you, that did it. The Wheedle knew he could no longer live near the bay, so he packed his belongings and he left. See the guy whistling? I'm not afraid of you. Well, He wandered high into the mountains, searching for a place far enough away from the workers that he wouldn't hear the whistling. He wandered and he wandered until he came to the very top of Mount Rainier. He listened very carefully. What delight! He couldn't hear even a whisper of wind, a whistle in the wind. He quickly unpacked his sleeping bag, his toothbrush with a snuggly on the end, and his white woolly pajamas. This was the quiet place he had hoped for. This was a place where he could sleep for a very, very long time. He just wanted some quiet, huh? Well, he quickly brushed his teeth. He washed his furry hands, and he slipped into his woolly pajamas. Then he slid his big body into his sleeping sack. He flopped his head on his pillow, and he fell asleep. Shh. Oh, there we go. He was so happy in his deep sleep that his big red nose blinked on and off like a flashing beacon on a tall pole. He slept through the night and through the day and through the weeks and the months and through several years. Wow, he really was tired. Oh, such sweet, sweet dreams. But after a long while something woke the Wheedle from his deep sleep. Something woke him up. I wonder what it is. Oh my goodness. Whistling. Loud whistling. Happy whistling. He looked about, and much to his surprise, he saw that the workers had continued to build over the years, and now had built almost to the edge of his mountain. But what was more alarming was that now everybody was whistling. Children and workers alike were whistling. "Oh no!" cried the Wheedle. "What am I ever to do? With all this whistling, I'll never get back to sleep." Oh goodness, the poor guy. Oh, I wonder what he's going to do. He began pacing up and down the mountain, mumbling and grumbling the whole time. Then his nose lit up and a smile crossed his lips. He had an idea. "I've got it," he chuckled, and with that he removed everything from his long striped bag, and with it dragging behind, he climbed to the very top of Mount Rainier. He stood on his fuzzy tiptoes, reached up into the sky, and he grabbed a cloud. Then he grabbed another cloud and another. One by one he stuffed the clouds into the bag until he had it full to overflowing. Like he's got all the clouds in his bag. I wonder what he's going to do. With that bag thrown over his shoulder, he set out for the source of this noisy whistling problem, the growing city of Seattle. The skyline of the city was filled with tall buildings, but the Wheedle only needed one to complete his plan. And the one he chose was the Space Needle. Wonder what he's going to do. Let's see. Bring in some clouds. Now, what's inside the clouds? Sometimes there's snow inside the clouds. Sometimes there's rain. Or, I wonder if he's going to sleep up there. Now, giddy to put his plan into action, he hurried to the base of the Space Needle. He jumped into the elevator and he zipped to the very top. There he stood and he looked about. All around were happy children and workers, all whistling and laughing and having a great time. The Wheedle chuckled as he reached deep into the soggy bag. He grabbed a big fluffy cloud by the tail and he slung it around and flipped it into the air. The cloud lifted high into the sky and then hung there like a glop of whipped cream on a blue kitchen ceiling. The cloud gurgled and sloshed. Then one drop of rain fell, and then another, and soon it was pouring. Now, the kindly folks in Seattle like the rain, but it is nearly impossible and highly improbable that one can whistle with any intensity in a rainstorm. Within the rain falling all around, everyone ran inside, and soon it became very still. and very quiet indeed. The Wheedle stretched out on the top of the Space Needle, and using the bag of clouds as a pillow, he fell fast asleep. Look, he fell asleep on top of the clouds. With each snarkle snore, his big red nose slowly blinked on and off, and he slept. As he slept, it rained, and it rained, and it rained. They have a lot of rain in Seattle. Well, let's see what's going to happen here. And it rained. The people of Seattle had to stay inside, and they began to feel very sad because they couldn't go outside and play. It didn't take much to figure out that someone was throwing clouds into the sky from the top of the Space Needle. Finally, the mayor himself went to the Wheedle on the needle to plead with him to stop throwing rain clouds into the sky. "Please," said the mayor, "would you stop throwing clouds into the sky? The kindly folk of Seattle love to whistle when they work, but while all the rain, there is little to whistle about, and without whistling, there's little work being done." The Wheedle said he was sorry, but still, in all, he couldn't sleep when he had heard whistling. There was nothing he could do because he just can't sleep with all that whistling going on. Now the mayor thought and he thought and quickly devised a plan. A wonderful plan indeed. So let's see what they're going to do. The mayor's plan was a simple plan, and sometimes simplicity is best. All through the night and into the next morning, sailmakers stitched and sewed cotton, flannel, and wool. Miles of thread were laced through the eyes of needles as the weathered hands of the sailmakers sewed. They sewed pink flannel onto yellow wool and blue cotton onto red flannel, and by early morning they had finished their task. Whoever said that mayors never think a thoughtful thought? This was a good plan. This was a great plan. Oh, I see. Well, look what they made for him. At precisely noon, not a minute before and not a minute after, the mayor again met with the Wheedle on the needle. In his hands, he held the largest pair of earmuffs you have ever seen. See these big earmuffs? "These earmuffs are for you," said the mayor in his most political of voices. "With these on your ears, you won't hear a thing. You won't hear us whistle. You won't even hear the big whistles from the ships in the harbor or the trains going by." The Wheedle pulled the earmuffs over his ears and was surrounded in the delight of silence. He didn't hear the kindly folk of Seattle cheering. He didn't hear the end of the mayor's speech. With the earmuffs in place, he simply rolled over and fell asleep. So content was he that his big red nose again began to blink. His nose was blinking. See that? "There's a Wheedle on the needle. I know just what you're thinking. But if you look up late at night, you'll see his red nose blinking." Do you see the red nose blinking in the picture? Yep, way up here on top of the needle. That's where he is all the time. That's a great story. I love that. All right. I hope you loved it too. It's pretty cute Wheedle, huh? All right. I love you guys. Have a great night and a good sleep. Love you. Mwah. Bye.